project leaders from last year to join us, Baljinder and Salman, who are going to share with us how they managed to adapt and modify some of the challenges that came along and to end up giving really effective learning experiences through listening to what the learners said, adapting to what the learners were needing. So if I can invite Baljinder to begin the practitioner expertise. I'll pass over to you. Thanks very much, Baljinder, for sharing this with us.
Okay, thank you, Andy. My name's Baljinder Baines. I'm the librarian here at Burton and South Derbyshire College, and I'm just going to share with you our project from last year, and some of the things, like Andy was saying, some of the things that we found out as the project progressed, some of the challenges and some of the opportunities. So our project really was, is about the LRC, so the Learning Resource Centre, and teaming up with the ESOL team. And we were looking to sort of improve reading outcomes for learners. And it was all about, seeing what would actually work. Now, for a number of years, we've actually delivered the reading challenge from the Reading Agency, which some of you might be familiar with or may use in your colleges or in your settings. It's really effective, but when I wrote the proposal, it was really to sort of say, what can we take it a little bit further? What is trying to sort of figure out what is really effective, what is working, and maybe some of the ways that we could improve it, because our kind of like ultimate aim was, okay, yes, we're going to use it with the ESOL team, with an ESOL group, but we would like to sort of roll it out further into the college, into different environments as well. So the ESOL group, if we go, if I just show you the next slide, it's the selected group was ESOL level 1, and I don't know if I can move the slide. There we go. So it's ESOL level 1. We built up some good links with the main tutor there, and the decision was really that we would conduct a number of sessions across 6 weeks for a selected group, so that we could deliver the reading challenge. And this is a very hopeless map that you can see in front. We needed a much bigger world map there. What we were trying to do was trying to get the learners to pinpoint where they come from, but also write the word library in their native language. So it just kind of does give you a little bit of an inkling, but it's not very accurate. So we just had to sort of put it across there. So that was the idea. I mean, to be honest, it did pan out a bit longer than the 6 weeks, because we got so engaged with different activities that, one thing kind of led to another. But that was a group that we were working with. So what would happen is that they would come, and then we would provide like a variety of different reading material, and we would record. We would encourage them to record their experiences through the diaries. And the idea was that we would expose them to different styles of text. So whether it's fiction, normally we start with fiction, but it could be non-fiction, leading on to that online reading, and obviously digital reading that we're trying to encourage, news items, and also magazines as well. So it was structured in that way, in terms of what we were trying to deliver there. Going to the next. Here on this image here, you'll see the learners are very busy looking at their phones, and this is something that we noticed as a project was going on. They really liked using their phones, so very attached to them, but they used it for translation purposes and for various other things. And this is one of the things that comes across when you're doing a project, is like you might start out with your own interpretation, but actually it causes you to sort of reframe what your practice is, and it sometimes gives you new insights in the ways that your learners are behaving. So as a result of this, as like watching them use their phones extensively, led to, if we move on to the next slide, is the Padlet. So we formed a Padlet. Now, some of you may already use this method, but for us it was new. And this was a way in which they could sort of record their review, and then they could also post pictures of what, also look at new words there as well. Now, we set this up last year, but actually this year it's been really important because there's no way, I mean, we've ran the reading challenge this year, but there's no way where we would have been able to do it without using this Padlet, using this technology, because it's been an absolute challenge. Particularly you can understand from libraries in terms of like people trying to take out items, books, and we're having to sort of quarantine them once they actually come back. So with the reading diaries, it works so much better, so that they can take pictures of their reviews, they can take pictures of what they have actually read, and it minimizes that kind of toing and froing in terms of like the diaries. So it's something that we established last year, but it's been really important this year, that in terms of allowing us to sort of actually continue the sort of reading challenge there. So that was one of the things. So we're kind of like exploring like the different technologies, and actually they took to it very, very quickly. They just straight away on there, taking pictures, posting their reviews, having a go. Maybe not 100% perfect, in terms of what they're writing, but they're having a go, and they're doing it. And just show you some of the other things. So we looked at structuring the session. So when they're looking at news articles, we're trying to get them to sort of break the elements down. So in this case, we're looking at identifying like the 5 W's on a kind of like a news report. So that's helping them in terms of like breaking it down in terms of their reading, what they're noticing when they're actually reading, when they're doing that kind of close reading there. And that helped, that kind of giving that kind of structure, when they came to us, really helped. Because they kind of like almost treated it as like a little bit of homework really each week. This is a bit that I've got to do. So it's that worked really well. And then if we just move on to the next one. What we noticed was that the learners were really selecting materials with their connecting really to their personal identity. And I want to give you some examples in a second of how the learners did that. So personally, this is the main thing that we noticed, was that it, can be sometimes very difficult to encourage people to read, but when it does link to something that they're interested in, it does mean that they are strongly engaged in reading it, and actually finishing it and choosing a text, and also getting learners to talk with each other and with us in terms of verbalizing what they were intending to write in their reviews, because sometimes when they are writing a review, they can, if a learner isn't very confident, they will copy the book or the article, they will copy the item there, but getting them to talk with each other and come to some sort of an opinion really about what they have actually read. That helped as well enormously in terms of their reviews as well. So I'm just going to sort of come to some examples now. This one is Raja, and this is when we were looking at nonfiction, and she had selected the Highway Code. After she read it, she said it was the most fascinating thing that she had read. She had strong engagement because she wants to learn how to drive. So this was very important to her. You can see, and I love her drawings there of different markings she's spotted, like the different on the roads. Just look at some of the words that she's vocabulary that she has pulled out: blind spots, vulnerable, dull weather, contraflow. So some of the words that she has picked out there that she didn't know what they meant. You know, she was just so infused, not just with the Highway Code, but with, like, you know, books with like learning how to drive, that driving theory as well. You can see here the engagement really with the actual text there. And then another example, we've got Isra here, and Isra is from Jordan. And she has a particular interest in science. So when it came to nonfiction, she said, can you find me a science book? So this is what she was looking at. She's looking at equations, and unbalanced equations. She's having a look at that. And one of the new words that she's come across is hypotheses. So she's discovered that, and a lovely drawing there as well. And that led, you know, so very often learners, you know, English is that barrier, but some, you know, for Isra, her past is like, you know, she's very good at science. She's very good at maths. She wants to aspire to go to university. She's probably thinking about going on an access course, you know, in the coming years, so that she can get there. You know, it's really, you know, it's very satisfying, isn't it, that they can choose something that they're really interested in. And then another example, this is Svetlana, and Svetlana's picked up Nursery World. So I don't know if you've ever come across that publication, but it's a journal aimed at early years professionals, really. Not something that you would really give like an ESOL learner to actually read, but she picked it up, and she was interested in finding out all about how children walking, if they are walking barefoot, it helps them in terms of their gait, so in terms of their posture. We've asked her to sort of like look and sort of jot down some questions while she's actually reading. So she started to think about what temperature is it undesirable to walk barefoot. These are some of the things, the thoughts that are kind of like going through her mind. And then also that she's making a connection there. I can remember now how I walked barefoot when I was little. And I'm understanding now that it's actually quite good to walk barefoot, and it's very healthy. So you know, so it's sometimes it just opens up some of the reading material that you wouldn't traditionally sort of give to like I said, to a level 1 ESOL learner, but just allowing them to choose. Sometimes they understand that actually the words are very difficult, you know, that they can struggle with the article, but that's just part of the process. It's just giving them that kind of confidence to you know, engage with it. So if we go on to the next one, just some other things really that you notice, and obviously as part of the project you'll be writing your research and putting it together, and I think that was very useful. Looking back, that was a really useful exercise. There was a writing workshop attended, and that really it just lets you sort of step back and look at what evidence you have gathered. It gives you that holistic, you know, you can just take in what you have seen, what you've heard, what you've experienced, what you've noticed with your participants in your research. And here, this example here, look at this chap is fluent in 3 different languages, and then he's learning English. And then this other example here, where these we started to notice a connection between, they were finding reading very relaxing, it was helping with their well-being, and that's something that just came in as we were kind of like doing the project, and it that kind of connection there, and we realized that actually it was quite nice for them to do some origami and also read from magazines as well. So there's things that just kind of unfold, I would say, when you are doing the project, and it's really, really useful to to notice those and put them into your project as well. So I've mentioned a lot of learners, and this is one from this year, and this is Katarzyna, and she's an example of some of the learners from last year as well. Whereas whilst they were doing the project, they really wanted to sort of develop further skills for reading, and they wanted to do more further independent reading as well. And I've chosen Katarzyna as an example because she, the main thing that came out for her was that she'd never attempted to sort of read a full book in English. And now she's not scared of doing that. So she's written that I now choose times to read in English, when before I always used to read in Polish. And even starting learners off with the smaller kind of ESOL readers can be really useful, because they just gain that satisfaction of actually finishing something. It doesn't have to be big, so they just get that confidence from actually doing that. But she's read, Becoming by Michelle Obama. She's read that. She's read that in her break. She's working very, very long shifts. But she'd mentioned that she had actually read 150 pages in her breaks in English, so that's not, from her perspective, she wouldn't have attempted to do that before. So just to some of the other things that we kind of like discovered, what I'd say is like, if you can, just be clear about what you want to achieve, and try to involve the learners in your project. Sometimes you can do a project and not tell the learners what you're doing. And so it's quite kind of like almost like an experiment on them. But it's much, much better if you actually sort of involve them. I think so anyway. If they don't know about the ETF, tell them, that this is what the ETF are about. We're going to do this project together. So when you start doing the questionnaires and you start doing the conversations with them, it's not a shock, and they're kind of thinking, what's going on here? Why are we having these discussion groups, etc.? Why are you asking me to sort of fill in these feedback forms? What is it? So take them on that kind of journey with you, and involve the learners. If I'm sure most of you will have done, but if you haven't told them, do tell them. Okay, then they'll help you as well. And also just notice all the little things as you're going along the project, that knowledge and insight. When you start a project, you want to change something. So, that knowledge, that insight helps you bring about the right kind of change that you actually want to bring. Just be open to it. And personally myself, I think applying something like this with the structure of the project is really, really valuable, because it does actually help you sort of connect back and explore your own values, as a teacher, as a librarian, we personally sort of really sort of gained a lot out of this project. And the final thing I'd say is that just enjoy the connections that you can make with other project leaders and people from. I know it's very, very different this year. Last year we had we had those events where we could actually sort of meet, you know, that's been a really again a valuable part, because it's so great to sort of bounce ideas off other individuals, and see what's actually happening. And very often we don't get the chance to see what's actually happening in other settings and different colleges, etc. So that was my final point. It was that was really valuable and very re-energizing as well. So just to sort of connect back to what you're trying to do with the project. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Baljinder. Thank you. That's an excellent example, which I'm sure all the projects here are halfway towards achieving themselves. So thank you for standing not at the top of the mountain, but halfway up and helping people, you know, to climb the next bit. That's great. I love you've got so much fan mail in the chat section, you know, that you'll be unbearable to live with for a long time. It's great. Everybody really appreciated that. So much about involving learners, about setting up communities, giving them people collaborating towards a social identity. Thank you. I'm going to have to move all too quickly on to introduce Salman to talk about his project. And the reason I have to do this quickly is Salman lives and researches in the real world, and he has his manager covering his class for 10 minutes. And we all know what that is like. So if I can introduce Salman to talk about how he tried to get his writers in London to begin writing for a purpose. Are you ready to go, Salman? You're on mute, are you?
Apologies, I've just realized I'm mute.
No problem.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for your message, Andy. My name is Salman Latif. I'm from New City College. And well, I'm actually really excited to be back. I was really hoping I could have so much more time than the 10 minutes. But unfortunately, just COVID had other ideas. And unfortunately, put the span in the works with regards to me spending more time here with everybody. Would really like to get to meet everyone and looking more into your projects. So I'd like to talk to you about the project that I started, that I did last year. And it was a very simple project, and it was a letter exchange project. And the idea behind it was to encourage students to participate in authentic writing and in extended writing practices, rather than just a short pieces of writing that they normally produce. Now, my focus were the students who were, as part of this project, were functional skills level 1 students. And I really wanted to engage them. I wanted to motivate them to write a little bit more, so they become more proficient, they become more confident. One of the biggest challenges that I'm sure you all would agree with is the students that we have, they tend not to read very much. What they do read are very short text messages or social media messages, and ironically, they consider that to be sufficient reading or effective reading. I mean, I actually asked this question to my learners, and I asked them, you know, what do you consider as reading, as in good reading that will help you to improve your reading and writing skills? And they actually said text messages and Twitter messages, or, you know, other social media messages. So I really wanted them to see, I really wanted them to be able to produce pieces of writing that's a bit more effective, it's a bit more detailed, a bit more extended. And the way we did this was we had partner colleges that we paired up with, and we would, my classes would, for instance, write letters based on their hobbies and interests, and then they would then share it with a partner college. And they were allocated a partner in another college on a randomized basis, and nobody knew who they were. The letters are introductory and reply, so letters would be sent in batch by each college by an agreed date within each phase. So it was also another way for students to understand the relevance of what it's like to write letters and write in a real life sort of experience, and get students to sort of taste what it's like in the real world. So it was quite an interesting project in that it linked in directly with the college's aims, with the college's own targets of attendance, of punctuality, of writing, improving writing skills, improving outcomes, improving results. And what I wanted to do with this project was also to see with the class that I had, to see would it improve their attendance, would it improve their punctuality, because it was a particularly difficult class. The students had behavioral issues and the students weren't very motivated to come into the classroom for regular lessons, let alone asking them to do a research project. In fact, I remember very clearly when I asked them to take part in the project, the whole class literally laughed at me. And they when I told them we're going to write letters and send it off to somebody else, and they thought, okay, well, who writes letters anymore? Who does this anymore? Nobody does it. So the benefits for the students were, for them, it was attendance and punctuality. Firstly, I was hoping that it would positively improve their attendance and punctuality, which it did. The college target was 90%, and we went above 90%. I think it was 94% for my class. The other benefit was writing skills. As I mentioned, I wanted them to write a lot better, a lot more detailed, a lot more thoughtfully, to put some, put a bit more sort of ideas, a bit more thought behind it. I wanted them to be motivated, and I wanted them to have, their self-esteem to be improved as well. Because a lot of students have said to me that they've been told in the past by their teachers that they'll never amount to much, and they'll never, make it in the world. They'll never be really successful. And that has really impacted their confidence. So I wanted them to see that they've already got it within them. I wanted them to draw out what they've already got. I wanted to draw out their skills, their writing skills. I wanted to draw it out of them. I wanted to change their perception of letters. I wanted them to have a real life experience of what it's like to actually write to somebody and have somebody else read your work, read your letter, and respond back to you. I also wanted to promote authentic writing, as I've mentioned as well, get them to write original ideas, not just sort of copy and paste, not just giving a summary of whatever they've got so far. Whatever they understand of the topic. I wanted them to write authentically, think of what they've actually got, and detail their thoughts, detail their ideas, detail their feelings, and detail all the, whatever it is that they want to write about. So it also had benefit for staff because it was a cross-college collaboration. Now, initially, we had, as a college, decided that we wanted to have a partner college that wasn't New City College. So we've got 12 campuses in total, and we wanted to pair up with another college. So my partner college was Manchester College, I think it was a different college somewhere further up north. I can't remember exactly. And communication eventually broke down. So we ended up making a cross-college collaboration instead, which was actually much more fruitful and positive than for it to be with somebody else. I think just the fact that teachers were able to talk to each other, and it allowed staff to teach creatively, allowed staff to actually jump out of the curriculum just for a short period of time and teach in a way that they want to teach, in a way that we would, as teachers, like to teach, because sometimes we are bound by the curriculum. And in addition, I think the project was so hugely successful that it's actually been rolled out to all 12 campuses. So we've now done it for all functional skills classes for level 1, entry 3, and even very basic letters for entry 2 students, just to give them the same feel of what it's like to get a feel like what it's like to send a letter, to write it and send it. We faced quite a lot of challenges. And one of the biggest challenges was that meetings had often had to be rescheduled. They often clashed. It was very hard for staff to meet. It was very hard for us to talk to each other because we were in different campuses. We weren't always able to meet. We set a meeting and we had to then change it around quite a few times. And it was a little bit frustrating in the beginning because we really wanted to meet more often, but it just wasn't possible, just didn't work out. Students also occasionally needed additional time to plan letters, to draft letters, especially those who wanted to spend more time. In fact, if anything, I think this was a positive thing, because for those students who knew, in fact, everybody knew that their letters were going to be read, and they were, I would say, at least half of my students, sorry, they were very keen to make sure that the letters that they wrote were correct according to spelling, grammar, and punctuation. They were also clear. They were easily understood. The message they were trying to say were readily understood by whoever was going to read it. So very often what they would do, they would take the letters that they wrote and they would take it home and they would rewrite it, draft it. Sometimes they would do 2, 3, 4 drafts on their own, and they'll bring me all those drafts and show me that this is what I've done. And they'll show me the final draft, and they will say, okay, can you take a look at it and read it? And I would read it and I'll give them feedback. But then moments later, they would then still give it to other students and say, oh, can you read it again? I've just made a slight more change. And it was really interesting to see, because they wouldn't do that in my functional skills classes, but they did that in the letter writing portion of the class. One of the biggest challenges I had was I didn't actually have a functional skills class to teach at all. I had all GCSE classes. And I feel that I was quite fortunate to actually be able to swap with another of my colleagues and get a functional skills class, because for one of my colleagues in my other campuses, he had to withdraw from the project because he wasn't able to get a functional skills class. And I think the other issue that presented itself was when I did pick up the level 1 functional skills class. I had more students. I had about, I think it was 20 students, and my partner college, they had, I think it was about 15, 16 students. So I had about a deficit of 4 students. So it was a bit tricky in that sense, but we saw this as an opportunity. We saw this as you know, as any research project would. This was an obstacle, and I wanted to work my way around it. So one of the ways that we worked on this was we had designated OTLA time, and this was agreed with our managers. So what that meant was every 3 odd weeks or so, 3 to 4 weeks approximately, we would have a designated time for about half an hour, 45 minutes thereabouts. Sometimes you could get a little bit more depending on how much time we were able to get, but we always had that designated time, and we were always able to speak to each other within that time. And one of the designated times was actually during CPD days. Every single time there was a CPD day, we always had at least an hour where we could talk to each other and speak to each other about progress, and talk about how we were progressing, talk about student experiences, and talk about, for as teachers as well, what it's like for us. We also created a scheme of work, and this was in line with the functional skills scheme of work, where we looked at the key dates, and we just made sure that we had everything fall in line with, for example, mocks and exams or any other assessment, speaking, listening assessments. And that scheme of work was very basic. It was just an outline. Each, let's say, week, we would say, introduce letter writing project. That's week 1. Letter number 2, create student profiles. And letter number 3, so week number 3, share the student profiles we've done, and so on and so forth. It was a very simple outline, and it was actually very straightforward, and it's very helpful because it ended up not being as prescriptive. One of the other things that, CPD days was, in addition to meeting with staff, we also had the opportunity to talk about how the project was going with other staff as well. So initially, nobody other than the teachers who were involved really took much, for the lack of a better word, they didn't really take much care or concern or attention towards the project itself. And what I mean by that is everybody kind of looked at it and thought, okay, well, it's just a project. There would, someone just get it on his own, and they sort of left me to it. But then when everybody, by everybody, I mean the managers, the senior managers, even the principal and the deputy principal, when they started to see that the attendance was slowly going up, behaviors and I think the behaviors and the outcomes of students were slowly on the rise for a difficult class, everybody started to take notice of it all of a sudden. And especially when students were walking out my class during the lesson, taking the letters, posting it in a mailbox, and everybody could see what they were doing. It really involved everybody, and everybody started asking questions. And it got others inspired as well to do their own research projects as well. Students and partner colleges volunteered to write to additional students in my class. So what that meant was, one of the challenges I had is when I had 20 students in my classroom, they didn't have anybody to write to because the other partner college had only 16 students. But from my partner college, the students volunteered to write additional letters on their own. And they were saying, I'm very, very happy to do that. Now, I've kind of, as I'm going through how I refocused, I've kind of just realized before I go into advice, I want to just quickly actually describe what my letter project was. And I think I've done that very well. The letter writing project was actually, as I said, is intended to exchange letters from one group to another. And the purpose behind it was to actually improve the writing, the level of writing, the detail they include within their work. And a couple of things I would like to add to that is I was very conscious about how students might be vulnerable and how safeguarding might play into it. So we asked students to create aliases of fictional characters. And they did this by, I don't know, they just chose any fictional characters, because some had Spider-Man, some had Bob the Builder, some had, I think I can't remember, some had Dr. Silver and quite a few others. And we only spoke about our hobbies and interests. And that was interesting enough because students then felt the freedom to write something without them feeling that they have to say something too personal. So I'm going to move on to the last bit, which was advice for project leaders. And the first piece of advice I would like to give, and I hope I can communicate this effectively enough, because I've been thinking long and hard about how I can say this to you. But I really want you to have faith in yourself, and I want you to have faith in your project, because your project is important. Your project is crucial, not just for your students. I mean, first and foremost, it is going to be important for your students, but for FE as a whole, because when you are able to show the success of your project, it's going to eventually change the course of FE altogether. And as I said to you earlier on, when I started my project, hardly anybody gave it much attention. Hardly even the students laughed at me in the beginning. But then the students were the first one to come on board and they realized the significance of what they're doing. And secondly, when the other staff, the senior management, the principals, when they're able to see that the internal targets were actually being met through this project, and the student motivation was being increased, student attendance was improving, results and outcome and progress was improving, achievement was improving. It was actually directly linked to the college targets. So have faith in your projects and have faith in yourself, because you can do this. The second piece of advice, that if you want to make changes in your project, if you feel that they're necessary, try to make them early on if you can. And try not to control the outcome of your project, but try to measure it. Perhaps your project doesn't, it's possible that you may not have the outcome that you wanted, that you hoped for in your project, but you may have picked up lots of little gold nuggets along the way. You may have picked up other ideas, other successes, mini successes along the way. And that on its own is also a success in its own right. And finally, involve others in the process. Try to make them a part of your project. I wish I did that with mine. I wish I did try to speak to others rather than just focusing on what I was doing in my classroom. The more people you involve, the more motivated they will be, the more they will want to take part, and the more they will want to be part of that success. So that's my project. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Salman. That's a super example of communicative purpose in what you're doing, and an excellent example. Yes, I noticed that you're being hooked away, but
That's my students. I'm just asking to wait outside. Sorry.
oh, no worries, no worries. This is researching in the real world, big time. Yeah. Absolutely fantastic advice about don't try and control the outcomes, but try and make it visible in some way. Yes, look for what is meaningful to you, look for what is worthwhile. That's great. And follow it through. And once you start involving the learners, then the staff will become involved as well. That's excellent. Thank you so much. And would you please thank your manager for covering for you? And yes.
Thank you very much. Can I request one final thing before I go? I saw Balraj was sharing some examples, and I realized whilst Balraj was sharing examples, I didn't actually share any of mine. So if I send you an email, are you okay to share it with everybody? Just to show you what it was like, so everybody can see what the progress students made from the first letter to the second to the third, and so on.
That's absolutely wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Andy.
It's great. Oh, it's been a major contribution. I think it's really helped people. Thanks, Salman.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Activity that you've shown in managing the situation, but inevitably the projects we start off doing, because they're not scientific projects that work with constant variables, we work with research students who refuse to be frozen. So we often get very different results from what we imagine we'll get. And what I'd like to do is to look at halfway through, if there are loose ends, if things haven't been going 100% as planned, which will be for most of us, how can we manage the messiness? And what I would like to do is move my slide on to the next one. And just to reassure everybody, as Salman said, don't try and control the outcomes. It's okay to refocus on what feels meaningful and worthwhile to you. So you can see what's really making a difference. You can feel it. And that's what's important. And there has been some lovely refocusing that I've come across. It was really nice to see in a prison where they couldn't get to the learners because they've been locked in their cells. They couldn't get to the prison their learners at all. They started to work with other members of staff, and that's really useful. Lovely project from Stoke where the teachers involved had wanted to work with the parents, but they couldn't get the meetings going. And so asking the students to interview their parents to find out what helped them with their maths gets a whole new discussion going that helps the learners and the teachers talk about maths and move on. We've had people redeployed because of circumstances. So instead of working with 12 staff and hundreds of students, they're working with a teaching assistant and 4 students. In that case, work with them. And when you've found out something really meaningful, then that's the time to get on and to tell the hundreds of teachers what's happening. So can we move on to the next slide, please? I think it's an important message for everybody. Most of us, and myself included, I've certainly done this, we tend to grasp at measurable things as being important for research because then we'll have some proof of what we've done. But there's big problems. It might be easy to calculate how long people have logged into a certain program, but it doesn't tell us anything about what the learners have learned from it or how they have learned. So rather than make the measurable things important, can we make the important things visible? And I'm not saying measurable, I'm saying visible. And so if we can think about, what is important, and if we can communicate it in ways that other teachers will understand. Lovely example this morning from an adult literacy situation where a 70-year-old learner eventually, if you want to know the impact of what the teacher's done, the 70-year-old learner now is quite proud of the fact that when he puts a bet on, instead of writing £5 each EW, he actually writes it in full, £5 each way. And he's quite proud of telling people that. That to me has great impact. And that's the sort of thing that will influence another teacher. Because remember, that's your audience, other teachers. And just also explain something that could be important. And we might need the next slide for this. Now, a number of people have confided in us that they're getting results from the students, but they don't know whether the students are just giving them the answers they want. And I'm now shamelessly stealing the example of when Vicky did some research on an OTLA project some years ago. All the students were coming back with 5-star reviews about how much they enjoyed it. And if students a happy sheet to fill in, most of them can be relied upon to fill it in the way you want it. But teachers have been saying, I'm not sure, whether or not they're just trying to please me. So Vicky had done a project on promoting equality and diversity. That's really difficult to measure the outcomes in practice when we're talking about changing attitudes. So what she did was she got some sheets. Next slide. Yeah. And by giving learners sheets to look at with some basic questions on, she got them to annotate these sheets. So instead of asking the question, did you enjoy yourself, looking for learners' appreciation, she said, okay, what does it mean in practice? What can we do with it? What should we do with it? And as a result of that, this is what she got. Next slide, please. Yeah. She really got inside the learners' heads. They put ideas down. They suggested how it could move forward. They suggested how equality and diversity is useful because it means you can talk to your children about it. It means you can begin to start thinking more and more about how other people in the class, in the street are treated. Also some suggestions about what could be taught in future lessons and how it could be taught. And this is the sort of thing we'd really like you to do, that if you have got surveys, and I've certainly had surveys in the past, use them as a starting point. Say to the learners, why do you think that people spend hours and hours logged into this program but don't actually get much work done? How, ask them about it. You use it as a starting point. Do try to talk to the learners as far as possible. Can you jump on 2 slides, please? There, that's fine, thanks. Right, at some point you're going to write up your project at the end. It's only 2,000 words. That will appall English teachers who know that nothing can be written in less than 5,000 words. But the key thing is, it's quite simple. It's what you did, how you did it, what difference it's made, what you've learned. And now in the appendices are souvenirs from your campaign, materials you've used, activities that the learners have been working on, and how they've responded to your questions. That's really, really important, because what is important in this is the audience you're talking to. And your next slide, and final one, is who is your audience for your findings? Remember, it's other teachers. So please have confidence to provide information that other teachers will find useful. And your mentors will guide you on this. Yet please don't think that if people can understand what you're saying, they won't think you're very clever. Teachers love examples from real life, so please, let's have those. So that's just my little J up to. Please think about what's important to you, what's worthwhile, and talk to other teachers when you report it. Thanks.